Welcome on inside a 2020 final edition of the Business and Social Podcast powered by STN Digital. I'm your host, David Brickley. As always, we are joined by producer Will. Also, a big shout out to Furker for all his hard work as well on the program, Will, this entire calendar year. People have been, really hoping for the end of 2020 for quite some time, and here we are. So it's the end of the 2020 season of the Business and Social Podcast, not necessarily yet the end of the year as we record this. But we thought, Will, it'd be good to do a wrap-up. Really, what do they call it? Crib notes, cheat sheet, really jam-pack all the knowledge of all the podcasts in 2020 into your prototypical, somewhat cliche wrap-up episode here at the end of the year.
Yeah, we were going back to the notes of everyone we've interviewed in this long year. And there was a lot of big brands, a lot of big names that stood out. So we wanted to go back, grab the best one or two pieces of advice from everybody and see what they had to offer, because I guarantee you'll learn something if you missed an episode here or there.
Yeah, so we were kind of looking at the brands that we interviewed this year, which when you look back at it, it's pretty incredible. What do they say? They say you are the sum of the people you hang out the most with, or however that saying goes. But it goes to show if you hang out with successful people, you may mess around and get successful yourself. So can you just break down for the listener that's listening to our wrap up here, like some of the brands we're going to be listening to and digging into today?
Yeah, it is no shortage of household names. Just off the top, you got Snapchat, Fox Sports, the NFL, Rhone, Swiss Army, the North Face, Jersey Mike's, Pepsi, Dish Network, Hulu.
The list goes on and on.
Yeah, it's a lot.
All right, so what we did is we went back and we pulled the top highlights we just pulled one of our favorite highlights from each episode over the past 12 months or so. And we wanted to do is just kind of jam-pack this into a highlight episode, or end-of-year recap, whatever you want to call it. So Will was so kind to work with one of our editors and kind of get all the top moments from the shows this year. Will, we will start off things with our conversation with Snapchat. Is there kind of a best practices once you actually say, you know what, you're right, I listened to this podcast, this is ridiculous, I got to reach my 13 to 24. How have you seen brands properly launch and make sure people know that they're daily creating?
So what we usually tell people early on is, again, find your voice in the platform. We don't want to be your voice. We want to give you the tools for you to succeed, but find your voice in the platform. It's not about posting every single day or every hour a day. And I think that's probably one of the biggest mistakes that happens early on when you just post too much, because then becomes, is this actually special for me as a user to come click your content anymore?
Yep. We
want to make sure that, as either an influencer, an athlete, an individual, or the XFL, what you're posting is relevant, interesting, and hopefully piques the curiosity of somebody to click into your tile that day.
All right. As of recording this episode, I don't know if you read this well recently, but I was reading a Business Insider post that Snap and Twitter now announcing an integration. Snap jumped as high as 8% to $53 a share with Snap and Twitter doing some pretty much Snapchat now allowing you to share tweets directly, and Twitter plans similar Instagram integration as well. So Twitter partnered up with some of the rivals here.
Social apps playing nice with each other. Who would have thought?
Which is very rare in our industry. So some good advice there. We've talked to the head of sports at Twitter, at Snapchat, at Instagram, and got some great info from them. So shout out to Anmol, and I actually talked to him a couple months ago. He's a great dude. So we will move on now to the next one, which is my boy, Michael Bucklin. What are the numbers you're looking at? You mentioned obviously digital revenue, but in terms of time spent or views or growth, what are those main metrics you're looking at?
Yeah, it's a little alliteration. It's the 3 R's. It's ratings, relevance, and revenue. Mm-hmm. And from a ratings perspective, we're definitely looking at views. We're looking at time spent viewing. We want both of these go up. But we're also looking at engagement. We're looking at follower count. These matter. And we'd be silly if we thought that only one of them mattered. It's a few that do matter. On the relevance front, this is significantly more subjective, but it's very it's a lot cooler when a blue check mark tells the world that they like your content or engage with your content than when you just share your content or engage with your own stuff.
Yep.
And then, of course, the revenue front, we would do this for free probably, but we certainly like to make money along the way and better our position in the industry and here at Fox.
My boy Buck, big fan of what Buck's doing over there at Fox Sports. Ratings, relevance, and revenue.
And I think a little precursor to that is you asked him, would you prefer if you got 1 million views on linear versus YouTube, saying you consume a lot of YouTube comment from Fox Sports, and how his bosses and how the network is adjusting to that as we kind of skew more towards the middle, I would say.
Yeah, absolutely. And, we're seeing this, we talked about it a lot on the program, but the digital revolution definitely fast forwarding 5 to 7 years into the future because of COVID and because of traditional marketing arms being turned off, your conferences, your ability to do, out of home placement, all those things have kind of been turned off, are really not the best bang for your buck right now. People are going into social, and, brands like Fox Sports, they've invested early and often into their team, and they're going to be able to really capitalize on revenue and more partnerships as they go forward. Speaking of Fox Sports, a big partner of the NFL, another good friend of mine, and I think I met him originally. Was the podcast or prior to the podcast? But anyway, it's caused a good friendship. My boy David Feldman from the NFL. How you guys are utilizing the actual players to extend the overall NFL message?
Sure. We have 50, 60 million followers across league channels, which is great. I mean, I think a lot of brands would love to serve that type of audience, and we're very fortunate about that. But when you add all 32 clubs followings, you get a few hundred more followers. And then when you add all, 1,200 plus players, now you're approaching close to 1 billion followers, a billion audience. So it's really kind of thinking about how we can leverage and take advantage of the entire ecosystem to get messaging across as many eyes as possible. Add in legends, add in influencers who make sense, add in partners like Madden or Procter & Gamble or Gatorade or whatever it might be. Yeah. And really kind of just make sure that we're doing our best to tap into all those different tentacles of the ecosystem to get messaging across and to just make our megaphone as large as possible.
Yeah, this is something that really hit home with me, and you see in the background there on video. Big Barry Sanders and Isaiah Thomas fan. Fun fact by David Feldman. But leveraging your ecosystem is so important, and brands don't think about this enough, is you have your owned and operated. You have, you're at NFL, like he mentioned, but then you look at your teams, you look at your players, like he said, you look at your legends and your former players, your different partners. And I was talking recently on a consulting call to a basketball conference. I said, don't just think about, let's just call it, for instance, the Pac-12. Don't just think about the Pac-12, but think about all the teams inside the Pac-12, all the active players on the roster. You have your coaches, you have your different athletic directors, those athletic programs, all those different things that you can tap into, as well as starting relationships with former players that had really good careers at those respective schools. And all of a sudden, your ecosystem is so much wider. You cast such a wider net than just your own and operated ad handles.
So if I was a viewer, I would ask you this question. Let's say, David, I'm company X. I don't have 50 million followers. I'm not the NFL. What ecosystem do I have? How does this advice apply
I think
to me?
what you have to start doing, you have to create that ecosystem yourself. So if you have a brand, let's call it, Will Kelly's streetwear brand, and you only have 600 followers and you don't have an ecosystem, you're right. You don't have any brands you can leverage. What I'm talking about, you look at Warner Media, they have CNN, they have Bleacher Report, they have TNT, they have Warner Brothers, they have HBO Max. Well, when you release a new film, how do we use our ecosystem in an organic way to get more eyeballs on stuff we already own? In your point, the Will Kelly streetwear brand, you're going to have to go out and find, maybe you give some free t-shirts to some select influencers, some gear, and all of a sudden you're starting to build out your ecosystem. And I know when we talked to the lovely ladies over at Way with the hair care brand, that's exactly what they did, is they've seeded an ecosystem themselves of those influencers and people, ambassadors of their brand that they give free product to, and in return, they can extend their message outside of their owned and operated.
Yeah, we'll get there in a little bit, but their strategy is almost starting with this process.
1,000%.
Start with the environment, start with your crowd, and then go out from there.
Yep. All right, let's move on. Who do we got next?
We got the great Blake Lawrence.
Here we go.
If you're looking at ultimate ROI and best bang for your buck, if you're an LA shop opening up and you want to be attached to Lakers, not avoid LeBron, but instead of going after LeBron, go get Caruso, Kyle Kuzma.
An athlete with less than 10,000 followers has a 10 times higher engagement rate than an athlete with more than 100,000 followers.
Wow.
You're going to have to work with 10 different agents and reps and managers to get 10 of the smaller guys. versus one of the bigger ones. And because that is a challenging process, a lot of people lean towards, let me just get the big guy. 10 athletes, you may have a deeper connection in each one of those audiences, but also if one drops out, you still have 9. That's the trends that we're seeing in terms of the brands that are going all in on athlete marketing, is that they understand that not only can they reach larger, more engaged audiences in different markets, but they can also diversify their risk.
All right, Blake Lawrence, we've had a lot of conversation with him. I think shortly after the whole COVID thing went down too, we had some good conversations with him, which is awesome.
Correct.
And he's so right. I mean, we've known for so long, Will, that the micro-influencer game is really where the money is in terms of the engagement play. Would you rather drop $1.3 million for one post on Kylie Jenner or spread that $1.3 million over potentially 100 different influencers? And you kind of you're able to heed your bets a little bit. To Blake's point, it takes more elbow grease. You have to sign 100 different contracts. But ultimately, like usually the old adage says, the more work you're willing to put in, the better result you'll be able to get out of it. And he's right. Some of these, again, the Alex Carusos of the world in the NBA could at the end of the day get you more reach than a LeBron James.
And I think a question we get a lot from people is influencers. I don't understand it. I don't want to pay some random guy a lot of money. What if it flops? Well, I think what Blake is saying, you don't have to get LeBron. Right. Why don't you take your smaller budget?
That's a big investment that may not work. That would be really tough to not work.
Exactly. Yeah. But if you only spend, 10, 20K, whatever on a Kuzma or someone, maybe you get great results and you double down, or maybe you stop and say, okay, influencer stuff is not for us.
Yeah, you are, like you said, you're hedging your bets, and you're, like the great Warren Buffett once said, you diversify your portfolio at all times, right? All right, who's next on the highlight list here?
Next is we're going overseas for this one, Ryan Wallman. You may know him better as Dr. Draper on Twitter.
There we go. Push-ups have always been really, really good. You can get really strong by doing push-ups and pull-ups, but they always have these new ab rollers and these new infomercials, and this is how you get big. But like it sounds like what you're saying is like there's a fundamentals of marketing, stuff that's worked for decades, if not centuries, that people just want to do the new, cool, fast, shiny object. And it sounds like you're just seeing a lot of that in the industry.
Trying to plan ahead in any sense, what you should plan for is that things are broadly going to stay the same for the foreseeable future. Things will, obviously there will be changes in the media landscape and you need to stay abreast of, your competitive landscape and all that kind of thing. But what you can be almost certain of is that things won't change significantly in the next few years. That's just not going to happen because it hasn't, as you say, it hasn't happened for decades or even longer.
Right.
So I think chasing the next shiny thing is a fool's errand, and we've seen a lot of brands come unstuck because of it.
Yeah, and I think what he's really saying is, and we talked about this on that podcast, Will, is there's so many brands that are not having the very basic foundational questions. We talked about this with Rachel Porges as well. What is your overall goal? Is it a revenue goal? Is it a brand awareness goal? Is it a brand affinity goal? What's your North Star as a company? What's your mission? What are you trying to get? What message are you trying to get to your core demographic? And then what's your distribution? We talked a little bit already with David Feldman at the NFL. Your distribution you got PR, you got social, you got these different levers you can pull. Email newsletter, website. We do that at the company here at STN as well. And I think fundamentally, people want the shiny new influencer, but they don't even know what their freaking email strategy is. They don't know what they're doing on the website. And you almost have to sit down, whiteboard out each of those lanes of that 360 marketing wheel before you get too freaked out about maybe the shiny object on the marketing, the new marketing trend.
I think your analogy in the beginning is perfect. Influencer marketing might not be around in 5 years, but the fundamentals of marketing that have been there forever since day one are going to work. So if you have budget and you have to pick one, invest in the fundamentals, invest in push-ups.
And often too, like I find brands that are, we have to get on TikTok. Well, you haven't even figured out how to have a consistent Instagram strategy for 3 years. And now you want to add another platform with another content calendar on top of that. It's much better, in my opinion, to go 100%, 110% all in on one of your distribution outlets, then go 11% across 19 distribution outlets for your messaging. So that's important when you want to know, should we move to this new platform? Should we be first movers? Well, how well are you doing on your other elements of your marketing plan?
And are you hiring anybody to handle
That's
these?
true.
Can't have your Instagram team running your TikTok full time. Next up, we have Lindsey Scheftic.
I'm always surprised by how often people don't know what success looks like. They want you to run this campaign. They want you to do this experiential activation. But are you looking for app signups? Are you looking for sales? Are you looking for brand awareness, earned media value? Were you,
Right.
did that happen in your roles too in the past where you were kind of like,
Oh yeah.
yeah, it just like what is the goal? And you kind of have to pull it
I
out of the
would
client.
say that, you have a lot of objectives, you have a lot of goals, but what's the priority?
Yeah.
What's the hierarchy? So I've definitely experienced a lot of that because I think the only success metric and the only goal is sales.
Yes.
So,
Amen.
you're not always trying to create a brand or build brand awareness because your brand might be gone in 6 months.
Yep.
So, but you can't do the lower funnel advertising without doing the upper funnel advertising. So you're kind of we're in like a tailspin all the time. I'm always trying to be like, well, we actually need to build the awareness and then we can drive sales. We can't just drive sales without building the awareness. So yeah.
The chicken before the egg, Will. The chicken before the egg. Yeah, I think oftentimes too, marketing is not aware of what sales is doing. We talked about this a lot in the program, like, one hand feeds the other, and sales and marketing are often not on the same page. And also a lot of marketing people, you look at consumer engagement and consumer awareness when it comes to marketing, but also at the end of the day, it needs to drive ratings. Let's say for linear, those ratings then will get you more advertising revenue. But ultimately, again, let's talk about our North Star. What's our goal? And then we can work our way, almost reverse engineer it from there.
Yeah, I think there's times where the goal is one post wants a ton of engagement or one product wants a ton of awareness around it. But like she said, you have to solidify your strategy ahead of time and know what the North Star is at all times for every single thing you're doing.
All right, let's go to our boy, Aaron Keith, business advisor, business coach, the man.
What is your optimistic outlook on how long this thing takes, how people can get through this time and get on the other side of it in a positive way?
Yeah, I think there's a couple different parallels we can take. So I'll kind of jump down each one. I think one of the first ones I would look at is how can you emerge as a leader? Right now, everyone's searching for, like you said, they're consuming so much content right now. It should be your content. You should be putting out double the content, maybe even triple the content you're used to putting out, but start putting out for how you can lead not only your industry, but your customer base. It's very important right now. Put that on the side now. Next. Most of us as business owners or in executive roles, we're used to surviving our week. There's a lot coming at us, fast and furious. Our project list, our to-do list is stacked up. You might have a little bit more free time right now. Now is a brilliant time to go in, build out that infrastructure, get the operation manuals, all the systems, the processes, revamp the marketing plan, get in there and get this thing squeaky clean because the doors will open. I don't know if they're going to open in 30 days or 3 months, but when the doors open, are you going to be flat-footed or are you going to be bolting out that door? That's up to you right now.
Well, I get kind of almost semi-emotional looking at that because that was back in April when the world was, not to say it's too much better off right now with the situation at hand with COVID, but a lot of unknowns back then for everybody in every industry, every business, everybody out there. And that advice was so paramount to us, and I think so many people. And you saw so many people come out as leaders, so many podcasts were launched, so many e-learning courses and all these things just to kind of help people through this time. But it's kind of interesting. He said, will you be ready to bolt out that door? And we've seen here in Q4 for our company and where social is, like we keep on saying, I think everybody's going towards social and digital and everybody's woken up now. They're woke, Will. And I think, we were able to be ready to bolt out the door.
This was the only piece of advice that I was hoping would be not incorrect, but dated by the time we recorded this. And unfortunately, it is not.
Yeah, exactly. Still going through it. But I think that as we record this, the vaccine has been approved by the FDA. So hopefully the beginning to the end of all this unfortunate things that happened in 2020. All right, who's next?
Next, we got Bonnie Bernstein.
Would that be your advice for everybody that kind of, during this time especially, you kind of look inward and say, if I'm my boss or I'm the executive at this company, how indispensable am I truly am?
I think that complacency is detrimental to your occupational health. It's that simple. For whatever reason, and I truly believe this is an innate quality, I have a hunger for growth on a daily basis. And that's not just professionally, it's personally. I constantly find myself looking in the mirror at the end of the day and asking myself, have you grown? If you have, how have you grown? And also, who have you helped and who have you been able to give back to? And that's probably a different discussion for a different question. But I think we all owe it to ourselves to constantly be challenging, being able to identify where we're really strong, but having enough sense of self to also be identifying where we're weak, where we have room to grow, and to have the courage to ask for help. Because I think that's hard for a lot of people, because when you ask for help, many of us feel that signals some sort of weakness. When I think on the other side, it's perceived completely differently. If you've built your circle of trust and you reach out to those people and say, I need help. This is an area where I want to grow. Can you be my mentor? Can you be my champion? Can you help me identify areas where I have the ability to evolve? You're always going to be better off than the person who is complacent.
You know, each episode, there's usually one quote you can pull out, and I love that quote that Bonnie broke down. Complacency is detrimental to your occupational health. There's nothing else you can say to that.
I was going to say, I don't even think I have
Move on to the next highlight. If you can't take any inspiration from that quote, wow. That was, I mean, she broke it down. Somebody tells you she's used that line before, but man,
I think that was off the top, and she crushed it.
That hit me where it hurts, you know. So no, it's that Bonnie was amazing. All right.
Next up, Nate Checketts, CEO of Rhone.
Once all this goes down, where did your focus immediately go to?
Early on, I remember seeing just this influx of emails, and I remember you and I spoke about this, so it's worth sharing. You know, I feel like if I ever shopped at any company, I received the same boilerplate email, which was like, hey, you know, we're safe, we're working from home, we're taking care of our teams. And this is what we've done. And to me, it felt very, and so our team was like, we need to send one of these emails. And it just felt very self-important to me. Mm-hmm. You know, if I'm a customer and I've shopped at a brand 3 years ago, why do I want to hear about that? I mean, I do want to know that people are being, brands are being respectful, but truthfully, I try to put myself in the place of the customer. And what it came down to for me is like, let's send the email that you would want to get if you were at home. You know, if we have to send one, if you have to send one, it better be a good one. And like a great email has to be better than no email. It's kind of what we say about meetings. It better be a pretty good meeting to be better than no meeting.
Yeah, Nate broke it down really well. I think this is right, probably April, May-ish, Will, kind of like right when everything broke down. And we saw that, right? We saw so many brands with the commercial during these unprecedented times. Blank brand is there for you, and it just came off ingenuine and something that wasn't really authentic. But I like what he said there. Put yourself in the place of the customer. If I'm the customer, when I feel a certain type of way about that, that's how we really treat social, Will, with all of our brands and all of our clients. It's like, is this too cliche? Is this lame? Is this really going to hit our demo? If it's not authentic, then let's not do it.
And I think kind of a 2-for-1 from Nate there also for internal matters. Your email or your meeting better be worth the time. People are busier than ever, especially being from home. So if you need 30 minutes of someone's time, make sure it's worthwhile. Otherwise, we have Slack, we have email, we have Rike, we have whatever to be able to send your message
and I think
across.
what you noticed during COVID is the people that really didn't have their marketing, their e-com, their processes in place, they were kind of freaking out. March, April, May, they didn't have the processes to even just execute the basic bare minimum. So they were just, they're shooting from the hip, and a lot of those things were not well received by their customer base. They were making very rash decisions that maybe didn't make sense for the bottom line and things like that. So again, I think this year showed us that if you have a plan, if you have a strategy, when you get into a crisis mode, then all you have to do is just go back to your manual and execute the strategy, and you'll be much better than the people that are just executing from the hip.
I imagine employees at like huge corporate conglomerates, imagine how many meetings they had the first couple of weeks so that they'd never worked from home before.
Yep.
Must have been back to back to back for weeks.
100%.
Next up, Hilary Hartley.
When it comes to your retailers, there's so many that are spread all over the place, obviously. Do you think the same thing when digital trade shows or different product launches that you guys can now potentially be able to leverage the fact that more people are tech savvy and can actually inherit that information?
Yeah, absolutely. So we've obviously many trade shows have been digital trade shows. We had started with that already last year as a test, and I'm glad we did. On top of that, catalogs has been a big argumentation back and forth. Some people still want printed catalogs. We're all done with that, so it's going to be digital showrooming, digital trade shows. I think, the relationships, again, where we come from, where we still work a fair amount with brick and mortar, the trade shows have value, but the emphasis in where we're currently investing, and, as was brought up earlier, being nimble, being more agile, being able to adjust things on the fly, making changes to assortments, all that, the things that we as leaders try to do day to day, it probably doesn't trickle all the way down to some of the salespeople. It's forcing our hand and it's forcing our team's hand to use these tools. So all around, I think it's kind of this digital revolution that's just been accelerated. Maybe we would have been there probably in 2-3 years anyway, but this overnight within 8 weeks probably pushed us ahead 2 or 3 years.
So true. Overnight in 2 weeks pushed us ahead 2 to 3 years, like we keep on talking about. That's why this thing has gotten so incredibly different, because this is just, like he said, it accelerated it. And it was interesting, Will, and kudos to you for booking these amazing guests. We talk often to sports, entertainment, the platforms like Snapchat, Twitter, Instagram. But to speak to some of these retailers, the Swiss Army Victorinox, the Rhones of the world, you look at Swiss Army and they're saying, okay, we need to really invest more on e-com, because traditionally we've really relied so much on our retailers, like our malls and our shops and those different brick and mortar, like he said. And, you just saw a lot of companies really double down on their online outfits to make sure that they're making revenue back on some of those closures that were happening all year long.
And maybe that idea your social person brought to you 6 months ago about how we can sell stuff on Instagram that you blew off, maybe you're like, boy, we need to implement that ASAP. But I mean, someone from all the way up as high as Hilary to all the way down, it affects everyone. And you had to be nimble for, a couple weeks, and you got a 3 years worth of digital learnings in
the president
a
of North America over at Victorinox. By the way, he sent me a gorgeous Swiss Army backpack in grades with the STN logo. I mean, you haven't came across a nicer guest in the history of Business Social Podcast.
In the words of Vince Vaughn, class.
Yeah, I wear the backpack every day, so shout out to Hilary for that as well. All right, let's move on to North Face. Steve, what about for you guys? How do you think really people being educated at scale from a tech standpoint changes how you guys operate as well? Because I think every company, right, is going to try to cut costs wherever they can as well. And if you can do something just as well virtually that you used to do in person, it's definitely going to be a consideration.
The biggest shift for me has been two things. Number one is the ability to focus and help the team, really sharpen what it is that they want to be known for and what is really important for the team, to spend their energy against. Has been one element. I think the other one is the implication for us of being more virtual has deeper roots even on the product creation cycle. So no one could fly to factories, no one could touch fabrics. So it's been really fun to see how creative the team have been working with our partners in Asia through photography, through digital product creation rendering, which we believe are going to make us more nimble and a lot more efficient as well. Because moving forward, I think we'll definitely take all the learnings that we had to create over the last 2.5 months to implement a much simpler, faster, product creation and engagement process with our teams, frankly, that will get us closer to consumers as well, and the ability to be more agile and react more. So these are definitely big learnings that we're going to take forward.
Shout out to Steve over at North Face. I think he recently got a promotion I saw on LinkedIn. So if so, congrats to Steve. But also, he also helped us a ton, Will, after the podcast with some really great advice on some different things. But it was so interesting, like I said, to talk to those retail brands like North Face, because you don't really think about it as COVID happens. The supply chain obviously is so deeply affected, but also, like he said, you can't touch the fabric anymore. So how do we guarantee quality control? How do we innovate? How do we create more product for our winter line if we can't even have people go out and talk to our manufacturers? So it caused a whole new way digitally. And also, I'm sure they'll talk about having more people on the ground in these different markets to make sure they can get a closer eye before they go to production on a lot of their new products.
And the same exact question was asked to Hilary, and they both had different answers. Yeah. His was more go to our Europe teams, to our global, and see what they're going to do, work together. And Hilary's was more, we need to work top to bottom on how we're going to fix things quickly.
All right, let's move on to the next one. Don Lane.
Last of the apparel panel, Don Lane.
Don, I think you mentioned, you guys may have done this before, but you increased your guys' daily huddles, anywhere from 18 to 30 people, I believe. And it seems like that transparency or that just like openness from the leadership on down, like really helped your staff kind of stay the course during the craziness of it all.
We have an extroverted group and people were missing each other. We started it for the purpose of being transparent and sharing information and cascading it down, doing it stand-ups at the beginning and the end of every day. And then when we started to taper back, people, believe it or not, were craving and saying, hey, let's keep doing it. Since then, I think there's Zoom fatigue, and we're doing other things to keep the team spirit together. The marketing team will face off against the product team, and on Strava, 10 of us will face off against 10 of them, and during a day, we'll each run 2.62 miles, adds up to 26.2.
It's awesome.
Marketing team is undefeated, I will let you know. But things like that to kind of be more human and live the brand and stick together. It's ironic how much camaraderie has been built, even though many of us haven't seen one another in person.
You know, what's so interesting about that is I think this also taught so many corporations about that transparency. You know, I'll be honest, Will, I felt like a wartime CEO in 2020, man, with all the different things going on with COVID and Black Lives Matter and the election and all these different things that kind of hit us where, you know, you have a team that's expecting, you know, some type of plan. You have potentially your employees that are scared for their jobs, just like every human I think that was in business. And there needs to be transparency, needs to be communication. And, you know, I know I learned a lot about that. And what it tells you is even outside of crisis, outside of a crazy year that was 2020 or a global pandemic, why not keep that transparency up? I mean, at the end of the day, the communication, transparency, nobody ever, I think, gets mad at being more transparent.
And I think from an employee level, from a team level, I know for me, like there's people that I work with here that I'm friends with, and you go from seeing them every single day, 40 hours a week, to I remember I was like, I haven't seen some of my friends in like 2 months, and I'm just slacking. I'm like, hey, how are things going? So I think just from a culture standpoint, whether it's a marathon, whether it's Zoom happy hour, whatever you can do to like, you know, give people that you're isolated sitting at home every day for most of us. So whatever you can do to kind of get people back together with their coworkers, their team, their friends, it makes a big difference.
Yeah. I know you miss Ben and Nikki. It's okay. Will. It's okay. All right. Moving on to who do we got next?
So we are done with the panel. We're on to panel number 2. This would be Mike Manzo.
Jersey Mike's.
Yeah. We're all dealing with this. We all have responsibilities in the workplace and outside the workplace. A happy household is a happy employee. And we say to our employees, don't give us your best. Give your families your best, and then give us the rest.
Yeah.
And I think that's how our leadership looks at it. And through technology, I advanced quite a bit in the last 10 weeks with technology myself.
So Mike Manzo from Jersey Mike's, I think what was really interesting about what he shared on that podcast, Will, was also prior to COVID, 10% of their monthly revenue was that of deliveries. That flipped on its head in April and May, where 90% of their revenue was from in-app deliveries, while the other 10% was in-store. What an incredible switch, and how that affects. And I think Mike was saying that how thankful he was that he had that infrastructure in place. Now, is it Grub Now or
Grubhub?
Grubhub, yeah. There's so Chow Now, Grubhub, Postmates, there's so many of them, but I think they have Grubhub as a partner. And he's like, thank God we had that partnership in place. Thank God we had all that stuff going prior to 2020, because without that, they would have been in a really tough spot.
And I think it's important to say the question he was answering there was, look, I don't know my employees' personal lives top to bottom, but I know now that from home, there's kids in the background, there's homework, there's dogs barking, and those are things as a leader you just have to accept and say, look, I can't make this 2:30 meeting. I have to pick up my kid from school. We'll have to figure it out another time.
Yep. All right, we're moving on to Nicole Portwood over at Pepsi. Nicole, you've mentioned with your guys' team, whether it's like fireside chats with executives or just like additional daily huddles, you guys also really increased the communication, and that your team just really loved the transparency during, the fear of the unknown.
When you give every team member as much holistic purview over what's happening with the business as possible, it helps to contextualize the work that they're doing. And in a time like this, when there's a lot to be proud of that your organization is doing, it can galvanize a team and really make you feel like you're part of something bigger than yourself, than your brand, than your team. It's, again, feeling like you're part of that prioritization. You're part of ensuring that our frontline is respected and protected at a time when we rely on them more than ever.
Yeah, I love what she said there, Will. Contextualize the work they're doing. And it's funny how Mike Manzo and Nicole Portwood, both amazing leaders at their respective companies, both large companies, Jersey Mike's and Pepsi, also both partners. I think they met each other for the first time on the Business Social. Will Kelly bringing partners together in this environment. But contextualize the work they're doing and the team feeling like they're part of something bigger. And I'm a big believer in The Great Game of Business, one of my favorite books. We're super transparent here at STN as well with numbers and sales goals and things like that. But I think I always say if the team knows the scoreboard, they can play the game. And that's what it seems like some of these very successful corporations during this time and even before this time, they communicate with their staff, and their staff can then understand the contextualize the work they're doing on a day-to-day basis.
Again, when everyone's in one office, maybe not as important, but when you have people spread all over the world, I think you have to give them as much information as possible. Wrapping up our food and bev panel, Luiz Barros.
One of the things we launched in Belgium, we created an activity for Jupiler, our local brand, called Defer Your Birthday, where you can basically sign up to have your birthday later on, because I want to celebrate my birthday in July, August, or November. I don't care. I spend my birthday at home with my family. It was amazing, but I want to have some time with my friends.
Yeah, Luiz, it's funny, not really funny, but it's amazing what a lot of companies did. And that was such a brilliant move by Budweiser, I thought, is to pretty much put your birthday on hold for when you can celebrate with your friends. Unfortunately, I feel like some people may have to put 2 birthdays on hold with how this thing's going. But, again, how do you be creative? How do you pivot during this time? I know so many organizations didn't have the opportunity to pivot, whether it's, event, hospitality, restaurants, which is so sad. But, companies like Budweiser, obviously alcohol sales usually go up during depressions and during things like that. So from the revenue side, they were probably doing okay. But again, so much revenue is made at the restaurant level, at the sports venue level, Will. Think about how much money is lost there. So they have to find creative ways to still market and get their brand awareness, because think about all the in-arena signage they had and how many eyeballs that were on their brand in a normal situation. But with this, they had to find more virtual ways to get in front of their core demo.
And to their credit, market in a politically correct way, not an in-your-face where people are dealing with the unknown. And I think it was a really creative idea by them, and I'm sure they had many others.
Yep.
All right, on to the next panel. This is Sean Robertson and Nick Woodhouse, starting off with Sean.
In my role, I'm partnered with Xandr, which is the sales arm of DirecTV or Warner Media, right? I'm partnered with Comcast, Cox, Charter, all in some regard, whether it's Dish or Sling. We look at where don't we have our sales force designed to be an effective solution there. Local sales. We don't have 1,000 people in local markets to go to tier 2, tier 3 advertisers. So we work with people who do. And what we've been able to do is use our technology to say, look, we can reach a very targeted audience. This is the time that you're not looking for the hammer, you're really looking for the scalpel to reach an audience in a very strategic way, and we've been able to do that.
I love that. I think that's not going anywhere, Will. I mean, the scalpel rather than the hammer. You talk about programmatic advertising, you talk about the data that can be retargeted for folks, and now that you can do this, and we know it, and all of our long-term clients understand it, now that you can target so specifically and hit the bullseye on the exact, like we've talked about, the Laker fan, 30-something years old, lives in San Diego. Why would you try to guess to try to hit that person in a magazine that they may or may not read or may not pick up that particular month? So, programmatic, digital, social, very targeted advertising. If it's not already the standard, it very well will be the standard very quickly.
And I think the flip side of that coin also is if you're Dish Network, you're not bugging the same guy who's never going to be interested over and over and over again.
Yes.
And he tells everyone, I can't stand Dish Network.
Right.
All they do is
Which
advertise.
Also, I think, leads to a better user experience, which is better brand affinity and all those different things.
100%.
But yeah.
Next up, the second half of that panel, Nick Woodhouse.
The Nautica brand, where Nautica for 20 years has done a photo shoot on the water. Yeah. Right? It's a brand based in the water, and there's beautiful people on boats. Okay. And How do we do that now?
Yeah.
Right. And the question, I instead when the team said to me, I said, well, what I would say is, how do I not do that now? Okay, here's your chance, right? Because a campaign that's been similar for 20 years is probably not a good campaign.
I love that. I think so many people finally had to, and this is with like Dave Chappelle made this, and I'm going way off the freaking reservation here, but Dave Chappelle sat down with Joe Rogan. You see this podcast yet with Chappelle? It's really good.
No, I didn't.
But he said, what an interesting time that we were in 2020. What an interesting philosophical experiment where humans had to sit down and just be still and understand, like, do I love my life? Like, look at all these things that I'm around, like my wife, my kids, all the crap I've accumulated over the years. You finally had to sit still and say, is this exactly the life I want? And that gets super deep. But when you talk about, what our boy Nick Woodhouse was saying about Nautica, and I think so many people sat down and said, we've always spent $1.7 million in newspaper advertising. Is that really smart? Or is this, we've always done it, so we just keep on doing it? And I think there's not really laziness, shouldn't be the word used, but you get into a rhythm, you get into a cycle. It's what's always been done. And this year for sure, I think shook everybody up like, well, now that everything's changed, our money is so really important to make sure it's going the right places. Every cent counts. Are we really going to continue to invest in this vertical, or should we completely kill that vertical and move somewhere else? So like he mentioned, if it's been gone for 20 years, it's probably a bad campaign at this point.
Yeah, exactly right. I don't think I have much to add to that. Just you got to get creative, and Nick knows better than anybody.
All right, so another obviously major moment, social injustice was a big part of this year. I know it meant a lot to you and I and the entire team here at STN, and we really took an effort to speak to some of the people that we really enjoy speaking with and have a lot of knowledge on this subject. So, one of the coolest things I've done, Will, is that Black Lives Matter podcast that we did shortly after, some of the things that went down. Obviously, the major thing that happened with George Floyd, and we quickly kind of tried to put together a show to see if we can help brands and help people of the podcast, hopefully learn something and see how their brand can take action. And we start things off with one of my favorite people, Tatiana Holifield, from the Pacers, but now VP over at Hulu. One thing that a lot of my Black friends have mentioned that also adds to the exhaustion is white people asking you, what should I do? What can I do? And it's like not really your job to have to lay out a plan of here's what you have to do as a white person or a person in leadership. Tatiana, I'm not sure if you have any thoughts on that.
I do. If anyone follows me on LinkedIn, they will see that was one of the first posts I put up on this subject, because I'm usually not one to be very radical on my LinkedIn channel, but it was like itching me. I had to say it because after George Floyd was murdered in broad daylight on social media and people reacted to it, especially the people in my circles or that I, see on a day-to-day basis who are not Black, the first thing they says is, what can I do? And for so many of them, they came to me and said, just tell me what to do and I'll do it. Yeah. And I was just
now the weight's back on your shoulders that you already have. Yeah.
There was something about that just irritated me to the core, because I'm like, I shouldn't have to tell you what to do. And so I went on my little LinkedIn rant about, don't ask me about what you can do to help. Look at yourself, look within your heart, and think about what it is you think you can do. And I'll be honest, there are some people who are just clueless and they don't know where to start. And that's fine. That's where the education piece of it comes in at, is start with educating yourself. And then
there's a great tool called Google.
Yeah.
Check it out.
and realize that slacktivism does not count. Wow. You posting a Black graphic with white text does not count.
On it.
Love it. You hitting the like button on your Black friend colleague's post does not count. Mm-hmm. Slacktivism does not count if you don't have action behind it.
Please trademark that.
So let's just all stand up and unite as one in a plan of action.
What gives me hope about this year, as sad and as tough as it was on everybody, that it just made us all have the conversations I think needed to be had. Kind of the elephant in the room that nobody really talked about was situations like this. And I know for myself, I tried to educate myself quite a bit, reading literature, watching documentaries. We had activists come speak to our group, Will, here at STN. And it's like, we all understand, people like you and I, like this shit has to stop. So how can we help? How can we do our part rather than, like Tatiana was saying, just posting a graphic on social and acting like that's all you're doing. We actually use Tatiana's advice and mentorship on this topic of like, what can we do as a company? What can I do as a leader? And, it means a lot to me. And I know it means a lot to almost everybody on our team that we're actually taking action steps and actually making progress in this area. And maybe it's just our little community here in San Diego or our little company that we run. But if it gets us 0.1% closer to ultimate equality, then that's much better than just sitting on the sidelines.
I just think Tatiana does such a great job in a 2-minute clip of summarizing everything, giving actual steps, actual advice, and telling people, here's what you can do, here's what you need to look inward, and then make a plan and work on it together. I don't think she could have said it any better.
I love it. We have Lori or Jessica next?
This is Jessica.
All right. In terms of, you guys put out together a really great guide shortly after this happened about how brands responded to this entire movement. What do you think were some of the things that brands got wrong or got right as far as their statement or their way to kind of help the movement?
In terms of how brands are responding and how brands are responding well. And then as we transition to this new phase, when now it's like, okay, well, what's next? It's about the action. And how companies really address, okay, there is racism out there on the streets with police, but there's also racism right here in our houses. And how do we feel like, can we take steps to actually address that? And so one of the things that really stood out to me in terms of a company who did it pretty early on was Uber. When Uber kind of had their letter from the actual CEO addressing some of the things that are happening, not only did he address it and say, we stand behind you, but then he said, well, wait a second, I'm going to tell you about, these are things that we're going to do within our company to change and make sure the implicit biases that exist in the world start to get eradicated here at Uber. And so he offered a platform and a resource for Black-owned businesses and Black-owned restaurants. He was going to support them on Uber Eats. He even said that he was going to work through kind of D&I and as we talk about this pipeline for employment and for Black employees and Black talent, he was going to start building that pipeline. And then I feel like the final thing that just got me so excited, because I'd never seen anything like that, was that he said that he was going to make it a business objective and tie executives' salary to making sure that they were accountable to achieving the things that they said they were going to do. And to me, that was like as we talk about accountability, that was like the best of all worlds. Like he said he was going to announce it. He had change and action. He said, please hold me accountable because I'm holding them accountable to seeing some change within our organization.
Well, I thought Uber did a great job. I also want to shout out our partners, NBC Sports, who I think committed $100 million to racial equality missions, which is incredible. Also with their ultimate goal as a, I think, company, at least NBC News and I think NBC Universal, their ultimate goal to have 50%, people of color on their team in terms of their entire staff is an ultimate goal for them as well, and taking actions to get there. So very cool. So many different brands, I think, did a really great work on this topic. And I know Lori Hall, one of my good friends as well, had more to say on our Black Lives Matter podcast. What are some other steps you think brands, in terms of, we talked about blind spots a lot as well. I think some people, I think there's a lot of excuses out there that can be made, but in terms of leadership, diversity of staff, Lori, would love to get your thoughts on, I think we were talking before the podcast started about just some blind spots that people may just have innately.
You have to assume there's a blind spot somewhere within you that you need to course correct, educate, become aware of, and then try to overcorrect, how you've approached or haven't approached, that blind spot in the past. I was on a panel for Promax and we talked about blind spots. And Lisa, I think her name was Lisa Towell. I hope I didn't butcher her name. She spoke a lot about that. And I think she has a book or something like that about it. And it was really interesting because even amongst the panelists, there were only like 3 or 4 of us, we disagreed on whether there were blind spots or not. So you think that everybody could be self-aware enough to say, of course I have a blind spot. I'm not sure what it is. Maybe I ask a friend, maybe I ask someone who's close to me, kind of like, what am I missing? But some people truly don't feel that they have that. And I think that's a problem. And I feel like companies and corporations need to assume there are blind spots. Even if you can't fully get on board with the fact that your company might have benefited from some sort of racial inequality, racism, et cetera, you have to assume there's a blind spot in terms of path of leadership if you know that your numbers don't look great enough to post, or your numbers don't look great enough to share publicly. And I'm not saying that every company has to, but you should assume there's a blind spot and then figure out how to tackle that.
You know what? That reminded me. We actually had a conversation with my friend Tina. She's actually now the talent diversity and inclusion director over at The Athletic, formerly at Bleacher Report for I think 6 or 7 years. Had a really good conversation with her, and she actually made a good point. She said naturally, as a white man, or as a white person, you're going to have most likely more white people in your circle than maybe a black person or Filipino or Mexican or what may have you. So what happens is if you all of a sudden, let's say we have 6 white employees as a start of the company, and you ask the 6 white employees, hey, do you know anybody that would be good for our 7th employee? The likelihood is probably you're going to, no fault of anybody's own, but you're just going to say, yeah, I got my good buddy from college. And the likelihood that person's probably going to be white just because that's the law of the averages.
Interesting.
Right? And that's how things happen. And that's the blind spot I think that Lori's talking about is like, well, all of a sudden you're asking great employees who have great recommendations that are in their circle. Like, what am I doing wrong? Like, well, then all of a sudden you wake up one day and there's no diversity of thought, opinion, things like that. So I think those are some of the things that I've kind of had those aha moments myself where it's like, damn, I never really thought about it that way, but that's why it's important to have proper recruitment. It's important to have a proper pipeline of talent and consistently make that a priority, because if you're just waiting to the last second until you need somebody immediately, we got to hire somebody yesterday, you're just going to not go through that process and maybe not give the most amount of people the chance.
And I think like Lori said too, even if you are aware of that and you're actively trying to solve it, maybe every year, quarterly, whatever, you ask your employees, you ask your partners, whatever, and say, hey, what are we doing wrong? Right. What can we fix? What do you guys, see? What can we fix in our process?
Yeah, it's a great point.
All right, next we are moving on to our esports and gaming panel, starting off with Mike Dalton.
So I think if anything that esports can really lean on compared to gaming, I genuinely believe gaming doesn't need any help. If you're not on board for gaming and you're not understanding how to utilize it or invest in it, you're silly. It's like you've missed it. It's still there, but obviously you've missed the boat in terms of its impact. I think for esports, the cool thing is how do you jump on this ability that the online element is really the bit that makes it different and keeps it safe, even post-COVID, is that when you when life returns, is that ability to be on 24/7. You can be on at 11 p.m., 2 a.m., 3 a.m. at night. The sports doesn't have that infrastructure. So I think for me, if the way that we look at it is like, how do you do stuff with gaming in mind? Esports is one of the pillars that makes gaming rather than the kind of centerpin of right. Gaming.
Well, the stat I shared on that show, and also the stat I'll share again on this show, the global video game market is forecast to be worth $159 billion in 2020, 4 times box office revenues in 2019, and almost 3 times all of music industry revenues in 2019. That's what he means. Like, if you haven't looked at gaming, you're silly. You're crazy at this point.
That's a nice radio tease, because that is what Ray goes into on his clip. But
there we go.
I mean, the numbers are still the numbers. But I think what his point is, and what's really interesting about gaming, is that, like he said, we can have a major tournament that starts at midnight, and no other sport. I mean, the NBA is not tipping off at midnight. So you're on 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, no matter the time zone, and that's what they're going to leverage.
And we saw with Fox Sports, I mean, the e-racing and the numbers those got, again, that changes the game, that you can actually monetize on linear with this stuff too, which linear doesn't really mean the future necessarily, but we know that Fortune 500 companies are now looking at alternate ways to get those guaranteed eyeballs, and esports is a way to get it.
Oh, it's a great segue into our next highlight from Shane Beerwood.
There we go.
Traditional brands aren't taking it seriously. Yeah, I would say in the next 3 to 5 years, I think we're going to see a massive shift in the way that more traditional brands look at video games and how their brands can be represented within esports.
By the way, did you see Travis Scott? How much money he made on Fortnite?
Did you see Travis Scott had like a custom release on the night the PlayStation 5 came out, and it was like a whole video he shot in the desert? And I know that because I waited up to try to get a pair of shoes from Travis Scott.
So you're part of it. Okay.
And I had to watch this whole video that he did, and it was incredible. But I mean, he's definitely, I can't think of anyone else that's more kind of putting themselves out there in Fortnite or PlayStation or whatever than Travis Scott is, and it's only going to go up from here.
But I forgot what I saw the article. You may be able to help me here, but the Travis Scott Fortnite astronomical digital performance, millions and millions of dollars for him to do a digital performance inside of a video game. That's changing the game and flipping it upside down from a marketing standpoint, and what this can mean for the future of esports, Twitch, tournaments. Like you said, that's a pretty incredible crossover from the music industry into the esports community.
And I mean, just genius for someone like Travis Scott, who's known not only for music, but for apparel and sneakers, to put him into a game where you can pay money to buy apparel and sneakers virtually.
Brilliant.
No-brainer.
I wish I was the man behind that idea, Will, but one day soon, hopefully.
Last up on our esports panel, this is Ray Calamire, who works at Inklu.
We've all known it for quite some time how huge this industry is, but why do you think it doesn't get the same respect? And do you think, again, this COVID moment potentially thrusts the video game market into the forefront? Because I think a lot of people in marketing maybe look at box office and music a lot differently than gaming. League of Legends, I believe, grand finale had more viewers than the Super Bowl.
For a second, imagine for me a world that's coming very soon where, looking at $1 million spend on Super Bowl versus $1 million spend in League of Legends for ads is going to be a no-brainer towards League of Legends.
And what was his quote? Ray's quote was, I love Ray's quote that said, "We've hit the reset button on society this year." And I keep on repeating that in meetings, and that's why I love the podcast. I always learn something new every single time we do this, Will. But Ray's right in the middle of all that stuff. And all the guys said the same thing and if you're listening as a marketer, pay attention to the gaming and esports space, because this is a place you can potentially get in early and be the hero internally at your local brand, because you're at the forefront of this. Because it's still crazy, right, Will? In 2020, 2021, you can still, quote unquote, be at the forefront if you do an activation with Twitch or Fortnite or League of Legends, when in reality, if you know this space pretty well, it's like forefront. You should have been doing this 5 years ago. But that's how you and I felt back in 2013, 2015 when it came to social and how important it was going to be in the future.
And how about if you're an advertiser, you take what you can't afford for the Super Bowl, spend it on the League of Legends Championship, get more eyeballs and potentially a more loyal audience, and get bigger revenue than you would if you spent $2 million in Super Bowl ad.
Great.
All right, now we have our Way panel. This is the last of our panel series, and this is from Hannah Beal.
How do you find that balance? I know there's not a perfect recipe here, but you guys are a brand. You provide hair care products. You're turning into like this lifestyle brand as well, but trying to find that healthy balance, right? Of like making change, education, propping people up and telling these stories, but at the same time, your consumers are coming to you for a product, right? So how have you guys figured that out? Do you just kind of have to like A/B test and kind of see what that perfect balance is of making change, but also focusing on product?
Yeah, I mean, I think we're lucky because we don't have an executive team or a board that is like, holding us to super crazy metrics. In terms of like engagement and social growth and things that we look at as KPIs on my team, some of the things that are an aberration from hair care and beauty content, they don't get as much engagement.
Right.
Also, it's a new type of content pillar for us. So you kind of need to like build that rapport and that understanding of what we're delivering there before people start to engage with you. But, we just have to sort of abandon the metrics and not think about them and realize that like we're doing this, to get as much awareness of these issues out there as possible. And I think it's just like, you got to read the room, like in life and as a brand, like,
and it changes daily, weekly.
There's been a lot of days this year that telling someone how to do a high pony was not what anyone needed to hear about. And if people are choosing to, follow you on Instagram or, fan you on Facebook or interact with you on Twitter or subscribe to your emails, like, we're coming into their their devices in their home on a personal level. And so if we inundate them with crap, then, you know, they're not going to want to continue to engage with us. And so I think that having genuine, relevant conversations about what's going on in the world from our lens and our perspective and what makes Way us, like, you know, we're very funny, relatable, conversational. We don't take, you know, many things too seriously. You know, we're able to deliver, you know, like good dialogue on both beauty and other topics. And so I think as long as we continue to be us and continue to read the room, then, you know, we'll just continue to tweak the balance as we go. And that's the beauty of social content too, is like we literally change the plan on a dime.
I love what Hannah said there. There's certain days this year where we're not going to be posting how to do a high pony. I saw you and I laughed once again at that. I laughed when she said it. But it's so true. And I think oftentimes you may think that be genuine or be authentic starts to become these cliche words and these buzzwords in our industry. But it really is like what you have to focus on and where you have to check yourself on when you start to put content on your feeds and you're treating it as if you're a showrunner for a TV network. And what sitcoms are we going to put onto our television channel that's going to work for our audience that seems in place? Like I always say, Comedy Central would never do Breaking Bad on their channels because that's not their demo. And they'd be like, why am I watching this? I go from a Trevor Noah, I'm laughing, and now I'm going into a kind of more of a drama here. So, she makes so much sense. And I got a lot of value out of that podcast, especially as we talked about earlier in this show, Will, about their ability to, their distribution outlets with their ambassadors as well.
Yeah, and I think when she says read the room, it means know your community, know who's engaging with your post. Know every time you hit send in a post, it's not going to just your core demo. It's going to every single person that follows you and who they share it with. So especially in COVID times, especially what we've been through, it's important to read the room, like she said, and also not the day for a high pony. A lot of days it is, but you got to know when it's not. Because the one time you post when it's not, it's going to be a huge mistake.
Yep.
All right, now we're going to wrap it up here towards the end. This is Karin and her sister, Lindsey Vaughn.
You obviously hire a financial planner, you hire your lawyer, right? But when it comes to social, I think it's, me and Karin have probably been screaming from the rooftops for a decade now, but it's like, this is so important. And like, you're obviously not going to probably have the same type of algorithm, detail and all those things that go into social as maybe a Karin has who's been there.
Yeah, I think it used to be a lot easier, before it was like this new shiny toy and like everyone was playing with it. And it was like, oh, this is so fun. I can, show my a different side of my personality that I couldn't show, kind of in my realm of the skiing world. But then, as time went on, it became, a lot more
like
tricky.
This is a business almost,
This is a business. Yeah. A, it's a business. B, there are a lot of ramifications, as Karin said, to what you put out there. Mm-hmm. You have to be careful with what you do. And now with all the algorithms, it's not just, you're the first person that comes up on the ticker. It's like there's a lot of different hoops that you have to jump through to get your account to be seen. And that's something that's not my expertise. Like I can put out great content, but if I don't do it the right way or the right time, then it's not going to get any traction at all. Yeah. So that's where I lean on Karin, because she's obviously been in this space for so long and she's always helped me along the way. But I think even more so in the past 3 years, it's become so much more apparent that you need someone's help. And I still post everything myself, but still having someone to lean on is really important.
I think with someone like Lindsey Vaughn, who, by the way, biggest name in the history of business and social. Great job, Will. But Lindsey Vaughn, obviously with her Olympic career in the rearview mirror, it becomes so much more important. Your brand, your social, that becomes your main distribution outlet, and also the main way that you can get paid by brands outside of maybe your ambassadorships or your television, commercials and things like that. So, Karin over there at Uninterrupted, definitely doing some amazing things with her sister Lindsey. But it's going to continue to be very, very important in the future with all these athletes as this becomes big business for them on the social side.
And I think, like Karin said, I had to tell Lindsey, like, hey, you have a following, you have fans, people are interested in what you're doing. She's like, no, they don't want to see me go down the slopes they can watch on TV. It's fine. It's how it's always been. She's like, no, you have a phone, you can give them access to everything. Right. And then the light bulb went off, like, wow, this is the future.
Fans like you and I, especially the Lakers, things like that, we love the JaVale McGee show because it pulls back the curtain of the team, and it's always it always works.
All right, and last but definitely not least, Rachel Porges.
What is your overall approach to marketing, and what is your core belief on how brands should approach it?
My core belief is that marketing is not that hard. And I think it's work I learned at Unilever, and it's just come with me. Marketing is get who to do what and how. And if you know the who and you know what you want them to do because you've set a business objective, and I mean a business objective, not a marketing objective, very different things. The fun is in the how. The fun is in the tactical planning. But if you don't know your audience and you don't know what you're trying to achieve, you can't do it.
Yeah.
And so I subscribe heavily. David Ogilvy always said, give me the freedom of a tight brief, right? And I mean, you know this from the agency side. I'm not an agency person, but I've always felt a responsibility to my agency partners, to my creative partners, even to my teams, to give them the freedom of a tight brief and to really define what we were trying to achieve. And to me, marketing is that. I take marketing from a very commercial mindset. We're here to achieve a goal. We're here to sell something or drive awareness of something. But if we're just doing it in a vacuum and we're creating pretty pictures on a page, we failed.
Yeah.
And so that's my world. And I think that if you get those things done, you have a really clear, tight vision of what you're trying to achieve, the rest of it's a blast.
You know, we often talk about tactics on this program, and it's kind of funny how it came full circle, you know, starting with distribution and Bucklin with, you know, ratings, relevance, and revenue. And then we end on Rachel, which is like a great bookend to a 2020 year. But, you know, again, we talk about all the time, like how this stuff seems simple at its core, but not enough brands, not enough companies are really thinking about the who, what, when, and how, who's our audience. And different campaigns are different, right? You have to look at, you know, if we're trying to increase linear ratings, are we good in one subset and one demo, but we want to attract a younger audience? Well, great. What's that younger audience? Is it 18 to 25 or is it 18 to 40? Like, what are you looking at? Because it's going to dictate such a different campaign, such different messaging, different influencers that you reach out, different partners that you may go after based on the core goal of what are we trying to achieve here. And I think Rachel broke it down probably as easy as anybody ever has on the podcast, and I definitely appreciated her insight.
Yeah, I think you said it's perfectly summed up a 2020 from logistics to infrastructure to distribution to creativity, and then wrapping up with what's your goal? What do you want? What are you going to do? And how are you going to do it?
And again, with 2020 making everybody just sit still and understand, like, do we have the processes? Do we have the marketing playbook? Do we have all these different things? Because when these crises happen, when these, you know, social injustice moments happen, what is your playbook? How are you going to go about that? And if you didn't sit down and kind of put that together, I think this year has taught us all, if you didn't have that, you better have it now and going into the future. But Will, kudos to you, my friend. It's been an absolute crazy year, and thank you so much for all your hard work on the show. Happy holidays to you and yours. What else? But no, I think we had an amazing calendar year of just some incredible podcasts. I think, like Aaron said early on, like, become a leader in your space. I really am proud of the work we did and the panels we released, and hopefully the knowledge that we dropped to the listeners, absolutely free of charge. You know, we got your back here. But in a selfish way, I think you and I both learned so much each and every episode that we end up talking about on calls or team meetings, and people probably think we read it somewhere or learned it ourselves, but we're getting all this knowledge from our amazing you know, colleagues and friends here in the industry, which is always a favorite thing for me to do.
Yeah, I think if you had told me at the start of last year that, hey, we're going to have 5 panels and we're going to have Lindsey Vonn on and all it's going to be during a pandemic, and the Lakers are going to win a championship, I would have said no chance. Maybe the Lakers. But I think, like you said, the reason we started this, or you started this, I didn't start it, but is to learn, is to grow, is to network, is to connect with people and to learn things that you didn't. And I think you can watch this video and learn 25 things that I guarantee you didn't know all 25 at the start.
Which brings us back full circle again to Bonnie Bernstein. Complacency is a occupational hazard, right? Or a hazard to your occupational health. But yeah, so thank you so much to all the amazing guests that came onto the program. We much appreciate all the knowledge that you dropped on the listeners. Thank you so much to you guys and everybody out there for listening to the program and giving us shout outs on iTunes and on Twitter and listening to my highlights on social. We appreciate all the just all the support for the show, and we really enjoy doing it. Going into 2021, I know we have a big plan, Will, of more episodes, more shows, more frequency. No pressure on Will Kelly.
Yeah, a lot lined up. I think we're going to have a lot of familiar faces back. Of course, some new faces, some new panels.
I'm looking forward to part 2s of a lot of these amazing talks, right? Because you can only get so much done in 45 minutes or an hour, and you see Joe Rogan doing 3.5-hour segments, and then he has part 2, part 3 with his friends too. But, you know, there's so much that you can get into and just talk and shop. And also this stuff changes so quickly. So, you know, our friend Taylor Stern, formerly of the Dallas Cowboys, had a good conversation with her a couple of years ago, but Mai has the industry change, and she's launched her own brand now, and she's a big fan of the show, and hopefully she's listening right now. But, we'll talk to her again and make sure that we keep up on the P's and Q's of the marketing industry.
Yeah, and I think for me, thank you to everybody who I bothered via email, via text, via phone for, very busy people for an hour of your time and prep and pre-interview. So it takes a lot of working parts to get a podcast done. I'm sure Joe Rogan has more than a producer Will in his arsenal. But thank you to everybody. It was a great year, and I think 2021 will be better.
I'm waiting for the $150 million for Spotify, Will. So I don't know what you're waiting for. Get that meeting started. No, but we really hope you guys all have a very safe and healthy holiday season. We're hoping that we're at the beginning of the end here with the vaccine coming out, and we can get back to some normalcy in 2021. But all that being said, hopefully we provided some knowledge, maybe a little bit of, just help during what was a very stressful time, and what still is a stressful time, and help you guys throughout. So we're always here for you, the Business Social Podcast. Once again, thank you so much to Will Kelly, Dave Ferker, and all the help from the beautiful people here at STN Digital. I'm your host, David Brickley. This has been another edition of the Business Social Podcast.